Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. Hope everybody had a nice little stretch break. A couple comments that I want to say in response to some of the things that were said by the panelists that I think are important just to kind of spend a little bit more time reflecting on before we move into exploring strategies of ways of increasing hope. Is first, when Dr. Angel was speaking about the concept of you can change the world, and I think sometimes we offer that as a cliche, and I think that's a false hope, I would say. The truth is that like very few of us are going to change the world. When we think of like things that actually have changed the world, okay, maybe the iPhone, smartphones, that's changed the world. That's fundamentally changed the way that we relate as people, that we conduct our affairs. The internet, of course, these are things that have fundamentally changed the way that we deal with things. Although the problem is, of course, and this is what a lot of the science is showing, is that evolutionarily speaking, we haven't changed much. And so now we're having to contend with these new virtual realities that we're really just not evolutionarily equipped for. But again, that's a whole nother conversation. So our goal shouldn't necessarily be to change the world per se, but really we can stay more focused on ourselves, on our communities, on our neighbors. These are the places that we can have great impact. We can have impact on our neighbors and on our communities. My boys, they play basketball for Kenner Rec League. And and I'm amazed that each of the gyms are dedicated to some person. And I have no idea who those people are. I have no idea why they got their names on the gym. I have no idea, but I know they must have done something important in the community, and not just in the community as a whole, but in that particular neighborhood. They must have done something special enough to merit getting named or to get their plaque hanging on a gym. So God bless them, And again, that's not necessarily a goal either, to get a plaque hanging on our gym or whatever. But nevertheless, my point is saying is that like our goals should be, if we're called to serve, our goals should be to serve at the most local level. That's the law of subsidiarity, that we serve at the most local level, that we make change at the most local level. And as a collection of nodes in this larger network, that's when change really kind of happens from the ground up, not from the top down. And so that's one thing. And then the connection with tradition and faith, I said right from the outset that it's going to be hard to talk about hope completely divorced from faith and from love. And we saw that beautifully in Chuck's dialogue about when they talk about, the girls and getting them in school and making sure they're educated in the faith, but also in their capacity to serve, as the Jesuits encouraged to be men and women for others. That act of serving, being for others, is love in action, is charity as we understand it, willing the good of other people. So we see this intimate connection between the two. I will say that as we speak about hope, again, connected to faith, set of values, set of belief, tradition, these things that we place our hope in, that these stories do have some meaning. These stories do have purpose. And then if we divorce ourselves, if we cut ourselves away from these stories, then there will be implications of that down the line. Maybe not so much right now, but in the future, we will see that. And I think we're already starting to see that. Angel, when she spoke again about just the way that she approaches the research, that as a sociologist, she wants to explore problems. She wants to find solutions to these sociological issues and ills. But the way in which that she approaches them seems to be a little bit different than some of her colleagues, and that there isn't as much anger, vitriol. And again, if we are to save ourselves, then we have to be crafty enough to come up with the solutions. We have to come up with all the answers. We have to come up with all the solutions, and all the burden rests on us. And that is a very, very, very exhausting proposition. And then it leads very much to then anger within ourselves and our own limitations and our own, capacities, and own limitations, our own inability to be able to solve all these problems. But then at the same time, it also then projects out, because that's what we do when we get angry. We don't just stay angry at ourselves. We project out into problems and blaming and judging everybody, and not trying to be honest and sincere in how we actually deal with these issues. So we have to be able to stay rooted in these traditions, in these stories, in these narratives that have governed all of Western history. They are important. They're not just accidents. They're reasons why these stories have lingered and why these stories need to continue to be passed off onto our children, because they are the fabric, the very fabric of what our society rests on. Okay, so let's get back into then hope, exploring hope. I'm not going to have time. I'm going to try to wrap up here just in about 10 or 15 minutes. I really don't want to go too long because I know there are some questions and I know the panelists are going to have some responses as well. And I want to make sure that we're very timely with our ending, that we have a hard out at noon. So I don't have enough time to go into a full detailed exercise. But I just really want to kind of prime the pump and say, okay, if you find yourself in a situation where you are struggling with hope, what are some things that you can do? What are some strategies that you can employ? Well, the first one is actually memory, as we've been talking about kind of loosely, but let's kind of make this very concrete. Neurologists have studied the parts of the brain that get activated when we are recalling stories. And those nodes, the networks within the brain that get activated when we're recalling memory, we're recalling stories, are the same networks that get activated when we activate our imagination, when we talk about creating stories. Because what we know about memory right now is that memory, particularly at what we call episodic memory, memory of our own experiences, not just data, not just dates and figures, or not just kind of an implicit memory of me walking, whatever, but like episodic, memory, semantic memory of me being able to recall stories and narratives of my life. What we know about our memory now isn't that it's just like a reel that plays, like we access to hippocampus, as if it's like a hard drive that we just hit play, pull up that file, comes into our conscious, and it just repeats kind of unscathed. No, that what memory, when we're actually recalling a memory, what we're doing is we're taking bits and pieces of different parts of our brain and compiling a story together, actually. And that story is our own story for sure, but that story is in fact impacted by other people's stories. It's impacted by our current subjective nature. If I am sad or depressed, the way that I recall certain memories will be impacted by the way that I currently am experiencing. We see this repeatedly when it comes to false memories. People, when they recall September 11th or studies that even before then that were done on, where do you know where you were when JFK was shot? People will swear that they know exactly where they were, and then they'll interview those people 15 years later, and then the stories are different. Why? Why does that happen? It's because memory is very subjected to our current environment. But what this speaks to is really a beautiful connection between our memory and our imagination. Our memory and our capacity to solve. Why do we have an imagination? We have our imagination to be able to create, to solve problems. We have our imagination because it's intimately connected with everything that we're speaking about, with hope. There's one study that was done that did a very specific memory recall intervention, and it's called episodic memory induction. Very particular way of being able to recall a very particular memory with great details. You get a group of people, what the study does, they got a group of people to do this exercise in great detail, recall this memory, do the exercise of the episodic memory induction. And then following that exercise of the memory induction, what they did is they gave people a brick. And then they said, all right, look at this brick and create as many solutions as possible, as many, not solutions, as many possible uses of this brick and appropriate possible uses of the brick. This used to be called, function fixedness, or what's referred to now as divergent thinking, right? So what are the many different divergent ways that I can use this brick? What the study showed is that in the groups that did have the episodic memory induction, they generally created more divergent possibilities with the brick than the control group that didn't have the episodic induction. It's awesome. It's just fascinating. It's fascinating. This is why, again, we're talking about personally why we need to cultivate good story, good imagination, good memory, recall the stories of our past. But then think about that again, as Dr. Parnham has been encouraging us to think about that sociologically. Man, what an implication if as a society we lose our collective memory. What impact will that have on our imagination and our capacity to solve problems, our creativity, our engine, our drives, our hope? All of those things if we get disconnected from our collective traditions and memories. So what's one thing that you can do to increase hope? Find somebody who's gone through some challenges in your life. We've already been kind of speaking about this in terms of just by proxy being connected with representation and listening to stories. But you know what? Go interview that person. Go call that person. I shared a story of my mom calling me. This was a month ago or 2 months ago when we did the first part of this back in August. It literally was like a week before my mom called me and just started sharing the story of how we immigrated to this country. And it was really encouraging. It was exactly what I needed to be able to be reminded that I can overcome. How did she do it? What did she do? The particulars of that. Then even in my own life, trying to anchor or remind myself of times that God genuinely manifested himself. From the first moment of my conversion as a lost freshman in college, to the time I met my wife, to my wedding day. My wedding day was spectacular. To the days that each of my kids were born, to the studying and completing my master's, to the early successes that I had. All of these things, and again, even right up until the marathon here recently, all these things I want to hold on to in my memory banks. I want to share these stories with my kids. I want to be reminded continually of how I've been able to overcome certain obstacles, so that when the future obstacles do come, and they will come, they have come, they continue to come, I'm anchoring my current experience in something larger than just my own subjectivity. See, the problem with depression or hopelessness is as we've spoken about, is a certain arrogance. Yes, for sure. Certain pride. Yes, for sure. But there's a certain limitation in it. It's saying then that everything that I'm experiencing right now is reality in and of itself. And what we know about depression is that it isn't reality. It is certain thoughts are firing, certain emotions are firing a certain way. Yes, there's an experience of that feels very real, that is real. When we talk about capital R reality, something larger than just my own subjectivity, that's what I want to place my hope on. So yes, I don't discredit or deny the times that I do feel burnout or sadness or any of those particular difficulties. But even in those moments, I have to still try to anchor myself on something else. And so how do I do that? Story. People's stories of overcoming trials and obstacles, memory of my own life, memory of the stories that I know through scripture, the past, the history that I am connected with. All of those things are absolutely important when it comes to cultivating hope in your life. Second thing that you can do is, and this was the exercise I wanted to do today, but I'm just really running out of time. Get very concrete in terms of what your goals are. Look at the various domains of your life. Look at your family. Look at your personal health. Look at your work, and look at leisure. Look at the various domains of your life and take time to articulate three goals that you have for each of those. What are three goals that I want to accomplish in my family? You don't have to set any time limit on it, just goals that you want to do. What are three goals that I want to accomplish when it comes to my own personal health? What are three goals I want to accomplish in my career? What are three goals that I want to accomplish in my own personal leisure? What are three goals I want to accomplish in my faith journey? Whatever it is, lay those things out, throw them all out. And then once you've done the brain dump and the brainstorming of just putting all those things out, go back into those three things and then force yourself to prioritize. Okay, so now I know what the three things are that I want to do within my family. Let's prioritize 1, 2, and 3. Force rank them. Now that I know what the three things I want to accomplish in my faith, let me prioritize 1, 2, and 3. Once I know the things that I want to accomplish when it comes to work, leisure, whatever, force rank them, prioritize them, 1, 2, and 3. Bam, bam, bam. Force yourself to actually do that. So then now you actually have some agenda to work with. Okay, so now you take one of those, bring it all down. Let's say family. You have one thing that you want to improve within your family. Let's say spending more time, being less on my Facebook feed at the dinner table, and I want to be more involved with that. Okay, great. So you want to be more involved at dinner. How are you going to accomplish that? So then you have the goal, set the different pathways upon which that you want to achieve that goal, and then set the obstacles that are going to happen within that. So I want to be more present at dinner with my family. What's the ways that I can do that? That means I have to be home at a certain time. That means I have to lock my cell phone in my car, or I don't know, being funny here, throw it in the sock drawer, whatever it is. I have to be courageous enough to encourage all my kids to turn off their devices as well, and for all of us to be able to sit at dinner. What are the obstacles to that? One, well, my own selfishness and a desire to check Facebook. Pushback from my kids that they're going to feel bored and not that and that they're going to miss TV shows or conversations with their friends or whatever it is. Those are the obstacles. You lay that all out so that way you're anticipating what it is, and then you have a plan for how you're going to overcome those obstacles. This is how we get very, very specific when it comes to goal setting. Brainstorm, prioritize, force rank yourself to do it, and then pick one of those and then go, what are the pathways of achieving that? What are the obstacles? How do I plan for the obstacles? That's the exercise I really wish I had time to do for today. But when I'm speaking about specificity, that's what I'm speaking about. getting to that level of specificity. Now, when you do prioritize your goals, one of the things that you also want to do within yourself is you want to be honest with what are your motivations for the goals. Good friend of mine who I've known for many, many years, has struggled with being overweight his entire life, morbidly obese, his entire adult life, as long as I've known him. And he is always, I mean, for many years has spoken about, I mean, people who are overweight, they know that they're overweight. People who smoke know that they smoke. It's not like you have to be the one to be like, oh, hey, you may want to lose a few pounds. Like they get it. You know what I mean? Like, give me a freaking break, like that's just the truth. So he's tried for years on his own to lose weight. He's done diets, he's done different things, and it just can't seem to get the weight off until a couple of years ago. And a couple of years ago, his kids now are in their teenage years, and they're very athletic, and they were getting into cross country and running, and he wanted to go out and run with them. He thought this would be a fun way that we can build community within our family. We can do 5Ks together, we can do 10Ks together, we can do some races, we can do things that we can do together as a family. Well, what he realized very quickly is that his obesity was preventing him from being able to have this family time. And so his motivation for losing the weight completely changed. It wasn't just for him, or it wasn't just for honestly, sometimes some altruistic or abstract notion of personal health. It seems abstract at times, but that's the truth. All of those things weren't enough of a motivator to get him to lose weight. But losing to his 12-year-old in a 5K, or not being able to keep up with his 14-year-old with doing the training, that was motivation. Not just out of a competitiveness, but out of a desire to want to share these experiences with his kids. And so once his motivation changed, bam, the weight started going off. And within 7 months, he lost 75 pounds. And he's continued to lose the weight, and he's getting very close to the goal that he has for himself and the target goal that he wants to get to. But it was his change in motivation that allowed for him to be able to start achieving the goals that he had for himself. So even if you do a goal setting exercise, want to be honest with yourself. This is where some type of reflection kind of comes into play, conversation with people. Well, what are the reasons why you're doing that? Sometimes making more money may not be enough of a motivator. Sometimes it is, because we do need money for sure. Sometimes success in and of itself isn't a motivator. But what are the real motivations that you have within yourself? And I'll wrap up with just a couple final things. So as I said this earlier, when you share these things, it makes you accountable to other people. Now, what that means though is accountable not in a punitive sense, but in a beautiful shared experience of life type of way. That vulnerability, that openness to other people is part of the attachment system. That's the area that I researched when I was doing my dissertation. The attachment system is to say that affective regulation really happens best when we are in dyads, when we are in community with one another. Our anxiety, our depression, our negativity, all those things are better managed when we have good community and good support around us. Again, that's part of the vote for having a good faith community as well. But even within that, having friends, deep friends, loved ones who can support you genuinely, so that when you are setting these goals, you're going to meet obstacles. You're going to fail at times, for sure. You're not going to be able to do everything that you desire, but that you have people around you who can genuinely support you, that are going to pick you up in those times, and that they're going to encourage you when you're being lazy as well. And so you need people in your life who can hold you accountable, but you need people in life that you can really secure yourself to be, people who are genuinely going to be key attachment figures to help you work through the highs and the lows of walking, through life. Last thing, be patient with yourself. If you do find yourself in a situation where you are struggling with hope right now, there's a reason for that. And you have to understand what the reason is. And that's the work of reflection in counseling and therapy and conversation with friends. And so just be even in this moment, very compassionate, very, very, very patient with yourself. We're going through tremendous issues right now as a society. COVID has opened things wide open. A lot of fear, a lot of anxiety is permeating, and the things that we wanted to do, we just can't do as to the same degree that we wish we could have. So I just want to end by just genuinely encouraging everybody to be a little bit more compassionate with yourself, a little bit more compassionate and understanding with your neighbors, and do the best that you can to continue to instill hope and to continue to bring it even in a world that so desperately needs it. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to wrap up right now. I'll stay on for the final conversation here, but I'll turn this thing over back to Dr. Amick.
Okay, thank you so much, Mario. Everything that you shared was so helpful, so profound. Jordan, can you make sure that Mario's back up there with the other panelists, please? I've lost him here. What we're going to do right now is myself and the other panelists, we're going to take about 10 minutes to unpack some of the insights that Dr. Sacasa just shared. Then in the last 5 minutes, I'm going to offer some thank yous. I'm also going to talk about what our next steps are, some ways that we're going to be moving forward. Realize that as participants now, you really fulfill two roles. One is you are a part of a community that is striving for healing action, and I think making some wonderful strides, not just in the abstract, but very much in the concrete. And the second is you are a prophetic witness. You are an ambassador to others. And so we're going to talk about some ways that you can incorporate others into that work. Just some kind of final thoughts. I'll go ahead and tee off, and then Angel and Chuck, you'll follow Angel. Just about 2 minutes each, but I'm going to offer just a reflection on kind of the concrete exercise of hope. One of our questions that we got in our chat section was about critical race theory, kind of some academic approaches and some different approaches to racial and civil strife that we've experienced. And I think one of the challenges with certain theoretical approaches, especially those that embrace Marxist tendencies and some other tendencies, is that they close off the source of hope. They close off the movement of grace. And whereas sometimes these approaches can be helpful because they tell us, hey, look here, look here, look here, do not have a blind spot. I think that's essential. It's important. I think to be available in the Catholic Christian tradition to every opportunity we have to grow in hope, which, Mario, I would say that if you want to grow in hope, be open to faith and love, certainly. Then I think we've got an opportunity to look at some concrete ways forward. I had Mario said, be available to the stories, be available to the experiences of others. And one of the ways that I experienced that was with one of our first Heart and Mind students who taught us so much about what it was to be a first-gen student. My goal for her was, about 3 goals down the road, she was a bit shy, and it was that she would be social. That she would be a member of this club. She went to the Presbyterian church that's right down the block, and we supported that, wholeheartedly. And then her mentor reached out to me and told me, I'll call her Kay. She said, Kay, when I packed her in, to the dorm room, because we were able to provide a dorm room for her as well. She spent the first 2 or 3 days crying. And I asked her mentor, I said, well, why? And she said, she finally realized it. And she said, this is the first time in my life that I've ever been alone. And she's in a family, her extended family, her father's different children were about 10. In where she lived in California. And for the first time in her life, it was quiet and she was alone. And instead of my holding the goal of being social up, I was able to identify for her, Kay, do you realize what you've done? I said, your first goal, your first win is, I want you to be comfortable getting to know who you are. I want you to be comfortable being alone and realizing you're a pretty special person to be alone with. Once we do that, then we'll worry about friends, we'll worry about clubs, etc. And it was about 2 or 3 months after that without my even pushing that social dimension, which is so important to college success, she came back and she said, Dr. Amick, can I bring my friend so-and-so with me to my meeting? I want her to see what I'm doing. Right? So setting those goals is important, but being aware of kind of the right place and having those confidence targets is important. And as far as concrete goals and planning them out, Franklin Planner Corporation has donated planners which allows all of our Heart and Mind students as well as mentors to do the process that Dr. Sakasa just described. They've donated them now. We're in our 4th year that they've donated one for every single one of our Heart and Mind community. And so I certainly want to thank them and encourage others to be able to use a system like that. Angel, a concrete example, please.
Oh, that's a really good one. I don't know if I can top that. So I guess you're asking for a concrete example of hope and overcoming despair or false hope. I don't know if I have one particular good example, but I did want to comment on what Dr. Sakasa was saying about the importance of memory and story, because that really stood out to me about how important that is, and that if we don't have some of these stories within our memory, some of the larger stories of the culture and of our faith in our memory, it's going to be very difficult to have any of that concrete hope. And so in terms of the likelihood of turning to despair, that's what can happen. And then you brought up in some of your initial comments, some of the kind of social science theories like critical race theory or the kinds of theories. And I think, I'm very familiar with those within sociology. I think that those can be useful for helping us to see certain aspects of the society and of the structure that are highly problematic. But I think it comes to, you have to bring that together or bring that into dialogue with your faith, with, kind of capital R reality in terms of what is sin, what is it that I can change and what is it that God needs to change? With the idea of reconciliation, which we see in the gospel, God trying to reconcile himself to us and us needing to reconcile ourselves with each other. So I think it's not so much about the theory, the critical race theory itself. It's about how we bring that into, what are we bringing that into dialogue with? And so if we're bringing that into dialogue with this larger understanding of who am I as a person of faith, as a person of God, what is my understanding of sin, what is called for in terms of reconciliation with others, I think that could potentially be a very powerful lens for seeing what has happened in our society. And when we don't have those lenses that are redemptive lenses, I think that's where we fall into the despair and lose the hope.
Wonderful. And I'm so glad too, Angel, that you're going to be helping to guide us in this process, first in November, but then also in spring as we look at what those concrete steps look like. So thank you so much. And Chuck, a final thought, please. You still on mute, Chuck? We call that the practice button. You get your first shot and then you go live. Chuck, you're still on mute.
All right. Better?
You have to practice twice.
All right. So much like Angel, I don't have a real concrete example I could come up with. I think the two things that came up for me, because we do a lot of goal setting with our kids, and two pieces that I really heard that I think are critical that I need to add to this process. One is, what is the motivation for your goals? What's the motivation for our kids' goals? Because they've gotten so used to setting goals, it's just kind of, sometimes it becomes almost an obligation as part of their care plan. So, figuring out what that motivation is and having them be clear about it so that, but the other one is the obstacle. Our kids have no challenges at all identifying a goal, what the action steps are going to be, and knowing what they need to do to accomplish that goal. But what we fail to consider, which is always what prevents them from accomplishing their goal, is what obstacles are they going to run into in that process. And so that's, to me, is like, for me, I just a critical piece. And I think it'd be so critical for kids, because it's not about, they all have the ability to do everything, and we make sure that they're realistic, smart goals and that kind of stuff. But we fail to talk about the obstacles, whether it's time, whether it's money, whether, whatever it might be. And so, yeah, I appreciate appreciate that talk. That literally one of the light bulbs go off deal for working with kids. And so, you know, as far as, you know, I think for our hope, I always go back to our service side of things, and by being able to go out and help other people, just changes things. And when our kids, it doesn't matter how old they are, can go and make somebody's life better and experience that and get a thank you and a very genuine thank you from somebody who you really helped, you know, that becomes contagious too. And,
I think you're right.
And so,
I think you're absolutely correct. And allows us then for a perpetuation, right? Where the one who has received can then become a giver. And in light of that, I want to thank all those that have been so very generous with their time, their talent, their energy, their attention. Certainly, Dr. Mario Sacasa, thank you so much for what you've shared. I appreciate that you are a friend of the program. We'll continue to be a collaborator in this work. Dr. Angel Adams-Parham, Mr. Chuck Roth, thank you so much for the insights that you've shared as you continue to work with us as we seek for the way that Catholic identity, faith, hope, and love can be a means, can be the means to healing action that embraces the other as other and allows us to share the love that we have received. I want to thank also Mr. Jordan Belair, who has been our facilitator and done everything behind the scenes. Thank you so much, Jordan. I want to thank the Daughters of Charity MMI, whose generous support allowed us to begin this work years ago, as well as the Raskob Foundation for Catholic Activity. I'd like to thank Franklin Planner Corporation as well. All of our partners and stakeholders. I'd like to discuss next steps. I'll invite each of you right now to go to the uhcno.edu website and RSVP. During this week, you'll be sent a link to the talks which we have recorded. You'll be able to send those to others and share. There'll be an RSVP button on that, and we'll encourage others to go ahead and RSVP as well. We also want you to share best practices with us, because the work we're doing is ordered toward, in the spring, when phase 2 becomes phase 3, is ordered toward our ability to share best practices, show how this intersection of Catholic identity and education can be a means of authentic social change, can be a place where reconciliation can occur. And we want to see what that's looked like in each and every place where you've been. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, your attention for the work that you do. Feel free to reach out to us as we continue in communication. And we very much look forward to seeing you on October 23rd, when our next speaker on love will be Father Josh Johnson, who will talk about love as a means to healing action, especially for racial challenges and for the ability that each of us has as children of God to be able to show that love both back to God as well as to each other as well. I thank you so much, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you next time. God bless and keep you. Thank you.